Welcome back, everybody, to the Hoosier Huddle podcast here on Selection Sunday. My name is Matt St. Charles. Thanks for being back, listening to the show here at the end of basketball season. Um, Obviously, as everybody knows, Indiana left out of the field here for March Madness. Um, I think it's definitely one we all saw coming, right? The bubble was maybe as bad as it's ever been. Uh, Especially with all this talk about expanding the tournament, to have a bubble as poor as this one, um, and Indiana still not get in, has got to be pretty disheartening. But I guess on the good side, Indiana listed as one of the first four teams out. So it gives you a chance to kind of compare their resume to the other teams in the first four out, as well as the last four teams in. But nobody to blame but yourself, in all honesty. I've harped on this over and over again, but it was right in front of you. It really was right in front of you. Sitting at 17 and 8, 8 and 6 in Big Ten play after the win over Oregon at home. Losses to Illinois and Purdue, bad losses, fine. Moved to 17 and 10, 8 and 8 in Big Ten, and then you just piss down your leg at the end of the regular season. Should have beat Northwestern, would have probably kept your tournament hopes alive. Probably should have beat Northwestern again in the Big Ten championship or the Big Ten tournament game, excuse me. And that game for Northwestern was more decisive than the other regular season meetings. So can't go on national TV and say you were wronged. Can't campaign for yourself anymore. It just is what it is. You knew what you were supposed to do, and you didn't do it. Um, so is what it is. As Indiana's season is likely over, I have no idea if they would be willing to take an NIT invitation, a crown invitation. I have no clue what this staff wants to do. Totally up to them, but I mean it's an older group. Most guys graduating, so can't see why they wouldn't want to keep playing basketball. Maybe win some money along the way if you're in the crown. Nebraska won the crown last year, and now look at them. They were the 2 seed in the Big Ten and heading to the NCAA tournament. So definitely something that could happen. But if you want to take a look at where Indiana fell on the seed list, they're in that first four out group along with Oklahoma, Auburn, and San Diego State, but Indiana is the last team listed in that section. So gives you a chance to kind of compare them to those other four teams. If, a few upsets hadn't happened in some other leagues where an automatic bid was on the line, and had left a few other spots open. But obviously, as we know, that didn't happen. So looking at them compared to Oklahoma 48th in the net and 4 and 10 in quad one, and 49th in WOB at negative 0.43. So higher than Indiana in the WOB, but Indiana higher in the net, sitting at 3-10 in Q1, 18-14 overall versus Oklahoma's 19-15 overall. Fair comparison. Both obviously left out of the tournament. Auburn was a huge talking point coming into this one, sitting at 4-13 in quad one. But with a positive WOB, given their strength of schedule, was a very impressive metric for the committee. So I'm a little surprised that they didn't end up in, but definitely had a better resume than Indiana. And then San Diego State, they're in the Mountain West, sure, 3-8 in quad one to Indiana's 3-10, but San Diego State went 21-11 in the Mountain West, and was pointed in the right direction at the end compared to Indiana, who just fell apart there. So understandable by the committee to list those teams ahead of Indiana. Obviously, Miami of Ohio is what it is. There's just no way that the committee was going to leave out a team that went undefeated in the regular season, even if their strength of schedule is 350, whatever it was. That just sets a bad precedent that, even when you take care of business in all your games, if you don't win the automatic bid, you're getting left out. So there's no way the committee was going to leave them out. The other last four teams in, NC State, Texas, and SMU. Take a look at NC State. Certainly a better resume than Indiana. 20-13 overall, 6-4 in quad one. Won 20 games in the ACC, so kind of hard to leave a team like that out, and a better WOB than Auburn at .80. So certainly a better resume than Indiana. Hard to argue with the committee there. Texas, the SEC was, down this year, but the Texas is a better team than Auburn, and Auburn got left out. So no way there was going to be a comparison there. Although Indiana has a higher net than Texas. Indiana at 41, Texas at 42. And then in WOB, Texas right there at even, 46 overall in WOB. The committee, I feel, wanted to send a message this year that WOB is going to be very important going forward. And comparing that to an Indiana team 52nd in WOB with a negative .50, I think Texas likely garnered the consideration over Indiana. And then SMU is right in that region when it comes to WOB with Texas, 45th in WOB at 0.05. And then when it comes to the net, 37th in net, so 4 spots better than Indiana at 20-13 in the ACC, 4-9 in quad one. So, overall, if you want to talk about expanding the NCAA tournament, and NC State's 5-8 in Q1, SMU is 4-9 in Q1, Auburn is 4-13 in Q1. Santa Clara was on the bubble 2-6 in Q1. Texas 6-9. San Diego State 3-8. New Mexico 2-7. These were just not teams that you should look at and be like, Charlie Baker keeps saying that one of the reasons he's in favor of expanding the tournament is that he keeps being bummed out by teams not making the tournament, like Indiana State a couple of years ago is his example. There's no way he watched this bubble this year and all these teams that fell apart down the stretch and was like, wish Indiana made the tournament this year. There's just no way. So Indiana loses 6 of its last 7 games, and gets left out of the tournament as it probably should. I mean, was just not a tournament team, especially down the stretch. Was there flashes? Absolutely, there was. When you look at that stretch in late January where they beat Purdue, went to the West Coast and beat UCLA, and almost beat USC on the road over in LA. Anything on that West Coast trip is really difficult. So not a bad loss at all for Indiana, and then come home and beat Wisconsin, who was just in the Big Ten tournament semifinals and was safely in the field, who sits at 22nd in KenPom. That was an Indiana team that absolutely deserved to be in the tournament. But the Indiana team that's been on the court since Sunday, February 15th at Illinois, no way in hell deserved to get bailed out by the committee and put into the bracket, even if it was the first 4. So it's a shame, sure, but the product that was on the court for the majority of the season was not an NCAA tournament team, although it was fun at moments. And I don't think that anybody had the belief that Indiana had a shot to get into the tournament. You know, going into the Big Ten tournament, you could say, well, if they beat Northwestern, then beat Purdue, like that's a team you have to look at for sure. But to go out there against Northwestern, if this team had found a way to beat Northwestern and beat Purdue and maybe make it to the quarterfinals in the Big Ten tournament, it deserved a conversation about getting into the NCAA tournament. I still don't think it would have happened, but it gave you a little bit of life. But instead, you go out there against a Northwestern team that you are better than, the 15 seed in the Big Ten, a team that out-rebounded you by 10 at home last time. You try a 2-big lineup with Reed Bailey and Sam Alexis playing together, which feels somewhat like you're scared of Northwestern. You go out there, have a decent first half, and then the second half comes and you just go out there and lay down and die. Simply no way that team deserved a look in the NCAA tournament. And again, don't think anybody thought that they did, but just feel it needs to be talked about given the standard of this program. So, to get off my soapbox on that a little bit, and we'll just take kind of a look back at the season. Year 1 under Darren DeVries, you knew there might be some struggles. There's no way, especially in the Big Ten, to just pick up the ball and run with it and truly compete. Especially given, when Darren was hired, what the transfer portal looked like at that time. Nobody was returning from last year, so there was no continuity. It was a brand new roster. And I think given all that, it was a satisfactory season in all honesty. Um, would you have liked to make the NCAA tournament? Obviously. But and did they have that in front of them at one point? Yes, they did. But to put together a brand new roster and to find a guy like Lamar Wilkerson right off the bat, um, puts you on the right path. Unfortunately, you weren't able to get the size and versatility and depth that you needed. Um, although Sam Alexis had a phenomenal season, if we're being completely honest, probably the second best player on this team for the majority of the year. Um, it was a decent season. Obviously, you started 7-0. Now, were they great games? No. Alabama A&M, Milwaukee, Incarnate Word, Lindenwood, Bethune-Cookman, but you took it to Marquette, which ended up not being that impressive, but at the time, everybody thought that the feeling was being restored. And you put it on Kansas State at home, which again didn't age well, but at the time they had PJ Haggerty, the leading scorer in the country. They looked like they had a little bit of life, and boy, did it go downhill over there. And then your first real road bump of the season when you lose your first Big Ten game on the road at Minnesota, a team that finished 77th in KenPom and not very high in the net, 80th in the net, and went 3-11 in quad one. Not a great look. Then Big Ten football championship game in Indianapolis. You got a great crowd in Gainbridge Fieldhouse. And Louisville, who's a good team, I'll say that. Louisville ended up being 19th in KenPom, and they were also safely in the field. Went as a 6 seed, I believe, today. Just kind of put their foot on your neck, and you never really had a chance. And then sort of similar what happened down the stretch here with Minnesota. You had Penn State, which was the Lamar Wilkerson 44-point game. Still highly impressive out of him. But Penn State was an awful, awful team. Then you have the Kentucky game where you just got beat up, in all honesty. We know Kentucky is a better team than Indiana, but to get just outworked like that, especially as poorly as Kentucky was shooting the basketball that night, was a bad look. Finish up non-con with 2 bye games against Chicago State and Siena. And you go into the bulk of Big Ten play at 10-3. And you're not feeling great about it. You're seeing some cracks, turnovers, offensive rebounding, the big talking points. But you handle Washington, you handle Maryland, and then you start to see this team against the upper echelon of not only the Big Ten, but of college basketball as well, just get floored. Now, obviously, you got Nebraska at home. You only lose by 6 there. But the game in East Lansing against Michigan State, you lose by 21. You go scoreless for, I think it was 9 minutes on I believe, 17-0 run, something like that. You just looked like you didn't belong on the floor. Iowa at home, which at the time was a big, big game and could have given you a quad one win that you really needed. And Bennett Sturts just goes to town on you, um, and you lose by 17 when you like really never had a shot. The offense was awful in that one. The only offense was Tate and Conaway, and that's when he got hurt for the first time. And what happened with that? Um, then Michigan, you lose by 14 at Michigan. Doesn't look that bad on paper, but that game was never that close. Um, then, like I mentioned earlier, the best run of the season where this team looked like an NCAA tournament team and a team that could even make it to either the round of 32 or the second weekend of the tournament. Beat Rutgers pretty good, where Tucker DeVries looks like he found his stroke for the first time since you played HBCUs in November. Then you come back home from a trip to Piscataway and beat Purdue at home, which Lord knows what's going on with that Purdue team. That's the only team that's more up and down in the country than Indiana. Just won the Big Ten today. No clue how that happened as the 7th seed. But Enright keeps Braden Smith in check. DeVries plays great defense on Kaufman-Renn for the majority of the game, and you find a way to win. Then you split the West Coast trip, which we knew you needed. A quad one win and double overtime against UCLA will definitely get the troops going. Follow that up with a loss to USC, and then you come back home and get another massive win in overtime against Wisconsin. And at that point, you're like, this team should safely be in the field as long as they don't completely implode down the stretch. And that's what happens. Beat Oregon, lose by 20 at Illinois, almost 30 at Purdue, lose at home to Northwestern, lose by 13 at Michigan State. So 4 straight losses. Come home and beat Minnesota. Yippee. And then, despite all that, somehow the narrative is still, if they beat Ohio State, there's a conversation to be had, regardless of what happens in the Big Ten tournament. Ohio State handles you pretty easily. And then you can only really help yourself, you would think, in Big Ten tournament play. And then Northwestern goes out there and handles you the same way Ohio State just did the game before. And it was over from there. I mean, again, anytime you lose 6 of your last 7 and get handled like Northwestern did as maybe the last time you'll walk off the floor, the committee is not going to entertain that. So, again, overall, given all these circumstances with DeVries coming in, bare bones left on the roster, to put together a team like he did, or the staff did, that had a fighting chance to somehow get into the NCAA tournament, up until the end of mid-February, basically. I thought was a great coaching job. I think anybody that is calling for him to be fired after 1 year, you're being a bit dramatic. There's just no way you move on from a coach like that after 1 year, especially given the roster turnover and all that stuff. It's too dramatic. They hired Ryan Carr, which appeared to be a mostly DeVries hire. I mean, everybody's hiring GMs these days, but it seemed DeVries had a heavy hand in picking who that was going to be. And And I mean, this is a guy that's won a lot in the NBA and has constructed some competitive rosters, one that went to the NBA Finals 10 months ago, something like that. I mean, and you're taking the reins off of him. You're taking the salary cap off. He just gets open free agency every year for now until something gets legislated, but Lord knows when that will be. I think despite what this roster lacked, I think it was clear to see that DeVries' system is fun to play in when you play it the right way. I bet if you ask Lamar Wilkerson, he had a lot of fun this year. Didn't win as much as he wanted to, but that guy had a phenomenal season. And there are certainly guys out there that think that they can replicate that if they come play for DeVries. So going into year 2, you have to learn from what won in the Big Ten. I'm not talking about Purdue, because keeping guys for 4 years is going to be impossible now. Look at Michigan, basically running 3 bigs, one of them being more versatile at all times. Wouldn't be surprised if they dabble in the European guys, like Illinois has done, to great success. So I think it was certainly a learning year for DeVries. I feel like anybody who said he made a mistake leaving West Virginia for Indiana is a bit mistaken. I mean, when things are good, Indiana should be one of the best jobs in the country. In all honesty, when basketball is good at Indiana, there should be so much support and financial backing that you can field basically any roster you want to field. So it will definitely be interesting to see what kind of support there is for DeVries going into year 2, going into the transfer portal next month. And I think he and Carr, number one, need to balance the roster, and Carr's been very vocal about that. You know, you have to have guys coming back every year. So that would be something to look at. Not just going after guys that are in their last year of eligibility, developing your high school guys, and getting a few freshmen, redshirt freshmen, sophomores from other programs that want to stay and build something. And I feel like that starts with Trent Sisley, in all honesty. I don't think you give him a blank check. I don't know that he's that kind of player, but if you want to put your foot in the ground at all and say, we need guys that are going to be here year after year, I think you have to get Sisley to stay, even though God knows what's happening behind the scenes with him. So that would be one to look out for. And I just think get a little younger and retain your guys year after year. And I think that starts this offseason. And I believe Carr and DeVries can do a great job of that. So that will do it here for the Hoosier Huddle podcast, maybe this basketball season. It was certainly an eventful one. It was a pleasure to cover Indiana for my first season in whatever capacity I was able to. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you when we see you.